Hey everybody, we are here with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. We're at the National Health Association conference and he has given us some of his time so generously. So we're going to jump right into a few questions. Dr. Fuhrman, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We are a group of people that are working on doing it right. A lot of us are doing it right. And so I was hoping you could start with just a brief description of the Nutritarian diet, generally speaking, and lifestyle.
Right. Well, the word nutritarian means a diet rich in micronutrients. So the foundational principle here, and the most proven methodology to slow aging and extend human lifespan, is moderate caloric restriction in an environment of micronutrient excellence. In other words, excess calories shorten our lifespan, especially when we eat empty calories. Calories with no nutrients in it shortens our lifespan. So we want to eat more nutritional bang per caloric buck and focus on foods that give us some value, have some food value to protect our health. And all long-lived societies and all centenarian populations are populations that eat 90% or more from natural, unrefined plant foods that are all rich in phytochemicals and antioxidants. So a nutritarian diet is really hormonally favorable, and it has micronutrient, the full symphony of micronutrient. We say it has an excellent exposure to micronutrients, both in the amount and the breadth. In other words, making sure it has every nutrient that humans need for optimal health in the right amount. So we're choosing foods wisely and avoiding processed foods and empty calorie foods, such as oils. We're getting most of our fat from eating nuts and seeds, because nuts and seeds have not just more nutrients, but also when we eat oils, they're absorbed into the bloodstream very, very rapidly. And when foods are absorbed very rapidly, they discombobulate the body's hormones. So when sugar rushes into the bloodstream very rapidly, it spikes insulin. And insulin is a growth hormone that promotes fat storage, promotes angiogenesis. And angiogenesis is the growth of new blood vessels to feed the growth of fat on the body. And in the process, it fuels the growth of tumors and cancers. And when fat's rushing quickly in a bolus, like when you take an oil, it fuels fat storage. And also, those oils make us, that rush of calories stimulates dopamine production in the brain and gets us more addicted to food. Mm-hmm. And the oils make the carbohydrates we eat more glycemic, more unfavorably glycemic. So if you're eating 200 calories of carbohydrates with 100 calories or 200 calories of olive oil with it, the carbohydrate calories are more insulinogenic. They're more insulin promoting, more unfavorable because they have oil with it. Now, if you had nuts and seeds instead of oil, whereas oils increase the appetite, make you eat more food, nuts and seeds are not all biologically available. Some of those fat calories are lost in the toilet because the sterols and stanols, those fibers in nuts and seeds, bind calories and bind fat and pull it out of you. Mm-hmm. And because they're absorbed so slowly, where the fats come in over a 3-hour period, they shut down the appestat, and the slowly burning calories entering the bloodstream can be burned off or burned for energy as opposed to stored as fat. There's a biological difference between eating food in its processed state, whereas eating food in its natural state. It's like eating an apple versus sugar. Completely different biological effects because the fiber, the pectins, the flavonoids shut down the appestat. It causes the slow glycemic response. And so there's a lot of reasons why natural foods have different biological effects than processed foods. So a nutritarian diet minimizes exposure to processed foods, it minimizes exposure to oils, and it minimizes exposure to animal products. And we eat instead a large amounts of plant material that's natural, especially those G-bombs, G-B-O-M-B-S, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds, which are foods that have been shown in medical and scientific studies to dramatically protect against cancer. Right. So, and also, the greens and the onions and the mushrooms and the beans, those 4 foods are particularly protective because they promote the growth of healthy bacteria. And the healthy bacteria that they promote adheres to it creates an adherent biofilm that coats and sticks to the villi, that's the interior walling of the small intestines, this finger-like projections that increase the surface area of the small intestines. And the biofilm created by eating those healthy foods create the best, most favorable microbiome or bacteria in the gut. And those bacteria slow the absorption of glucose to the digestive tract wall. So the low glycemic foods, we want like nuts and berries and beans, are low glycemic, but the moderately low glycemic food like oatmeal and mangoes, for example, become low glycemic foods when we regularly eat beans and greens and onions and mushrooms because of the favorable biofilm.
Right.
So our whole diet becomes more glycemically favorable when we eat properly. Our whole diet becomes less inflammatory when we flood the body with micronutrients. The immune system functions better. We don't produce the type of bacteria that are built up and stay living in your digestive tract, or a different type of bacteria than when we eat an unhealthier diet. So there's a whole constellation of reasons why a nutritarian diet slows the aging process and prevents cancer and prevents heart disease and prevents stroke. And it's not just preventative, because therapeutically, a diet that's designed to be ideal like this also enables people to reverse disease and get well from asthma, fibromyalgia, headaches, digestive disorders, and of course, reverse heart disease, reverse high blood pressure, reverse diabetes, become non-diabetic, and even reverse many early stage cancers are reversible with this approach.
Okay. Can you speak to some of the differences or contradictions between a nutritarian and, say, a high starch diet or a starchivore diet?
Well, there's really a lot of differences here.
Mm-hmm.
See, let's talk about a few of the differences. Number one, the high carbohydrate or high starch diet, where a person's eating a lot of rice and potato and not a lot of beans and greens and nuts, is much lower in protein.
Okay.
So it becomes protein unfavorable at the extents of life, especially unfavorable and particularly dangerous for toddlers and babies, for young children and toddlers when they're growing, and it could cause failure to thrive or growth restriction. And in the elderly, when protein bioavailability go down, it could lead to IGF-1 dropping too low and could lead to frailty and increasing the risk of even cancer or heart disease, as IGF-1 could drop too low. So excess IGF-1 from too much animal protein is dangerous, but a diet that could be marginally low in protein can be dangerous for some people that are susceptible to that. So that's one reason. But what we know from the scientific literature, unquestionably without controversy, is that as we rev up more nuts and seeds in the diet, we don't just see less cardiovascular deaths, we also see less cancer deaths, because these high phytochemicals, cancer-protective phytochemicals, are absorbed 10 times better when there's more fat present in the meal. So so the starch diet is too heavy in grains and potatoes, and they're not getting the wide exposure to anti-cancer phytochemicals like green vegetables and berries and nuts and beans. They're not getting the full enough of that symphony of phytochemicals, but they're not the phytochemicals they are exposed to. They're not absorbing them well, increasing the risk of cancer and making the diet more inflammatory, shortening lifespan. What I'm saying is right now, in the Adventist Health Study, published in the early 2000s, like 2001 and 2005, showed that those vegans who didn't eat nuts and seeds did not live as long as vegans who ate more nuts and seeds. And it showed that those non-vegans who ate some regular consumption of animal products, who ate nuts and seeds, lived longer than the vegans who didn't eat nuts and seeds. The longest lived were the vegans who ate nuts and seeds. Now, in the follow-up to that study, the Adventist Health Study 2, which came out in 2018, just a few months ago, it showed that people who ate more nuts and seeds had a 40% lower risk of cardiovascular death compared to people eating smaller amounts of nuts and seeds. They showed both that in the Adventist Health Study 2, it showed that more meat went for more cardiovascular deaths, more meat proteins, and more nuts made for less cardiovascular deaths by a huge amount among people that were eating relatively healthily. And we'll see this not just one study. We have a meta-analysis of 39 studies involving I think it's about 3,000 deaths. We're talking about large numbers of people, like 200,000 people in the study. Many, many thousands of deaths, analyzing their deaths, finding that regular consumption of nuts and seeds dramatically decreases both cardiovascular deaths and all-cause mortality. So trying to control your weight by restricting fat, by cutting out nuts and seeds, is like because there's lots of ways we can lose weight. Mm-hmm. There's lots we can eat just Twinkies to lose weight, or just a rice diet. There was the Kempner diet, which was nothing but rice to lose weight, but follows people for 20, 30 years are going to have more cancer because they're not exposed to enough anti-cancer protective foods. Just being on a Twinkie diet or a cookie diet may cause you to lose weight. You're sick of eating cookies. How much cookies can you eat? You don't eat less calories, look a little better, but those are short, soft endpoints. For a study to have more credence, we want to look at large numbers of people going on for many decades looking at hard endpoints like death or heart attacks or cancer. And all the studies, the meta-analysis of more than 40 different studies, show that adding nuts and seeds to a diet regularly, more than even, in other words, having a half an ounce with lunch and a half an ounce with dinner to facilitate the absorption of the phytochemicals and a half an ounce with breakfast, having 1.5 to 2.5 ounces a day, not just restricting your fat calories, but putting more of those nut calories in and taking out more of the processed or the cooked carbohydrate calories is going to make the diet, make you age slower and make you much more protective against both heart disease and cancer. So a diet that removes the nuts and seeds for the fear of eating the fat is increasing your risk of cardiac arrhythmia, sudden cardiac death, and cardiovascular death. And that's unquestionably can't be denied. It's one study repeated in another study and repeated in another. Repeated in multiple studies show the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that's one difference.
Right.
The other difference is that the foods that show the most protection against, that are lifespan enhancing and cancer protective, are green vegetables. We got to eat a diet high in green vegetables, including, raw onion and some raw cruciferous like watercress or arugula or raw kale. So we want to eat a lot of green vegetables. We want to wok vegetables and cook them and conservatively cook them, not to bloat all the nutrients. And a lot of these diets are heavily cooked, and everything, the nutrients are lost in cooking. People are eating mostly cooked foods and cooked starches. And their diet, a diet with less nutrients, without as much anti-cancer foods, and without as much absorbability, is not healthier than a diet that has healthier foods in it. A diet that's not as healthy is not as healthy. So people want to believe what they want to believe based on predetermined notion, biases, and all types of favored eating styles, but you like what you get used to eating. And why not make the diet ideal for lifespan, and then using those parameters make it taste great and develop recipes. And I have, so many nutritarian chefs and famous nutritarian chefs around the world now making it taste incredibly delicious. And you adapt to it, and you really like the diet, you get used to eating. So whether you think you like this diet or like that diet better, that's kind of irrelevant right now. Think about what's best for your long-term health if you want to live and age slower and live to be 100 years old, and then see if you can learn how to love that diet and make it taste great. And that's what we've done over the last 3 decades. Right. We've made a nutritarian diet taste phenomenal, so people love it. And so I'll repeat, the most proven methodology to extend lifespan is moderate caloric restriction in an environment of micronutrient excellence. That's it. Moderate caloric restriction. We're not looking for fads to speed up the metabolic rate. We're not looking to cut out fat so you can eat more volume of food. We're not trying to have people say, I'm never hungry, I can eat as much as I want, I'm never hungry, I'm still losing weight. That's not the goal. If you're never hungry, you're not eating right. Because that means you're chronically still overeating if you're never hungry. Mm-hmm. We want people to be hungry sometimes. We want people to not keep eating food all the time so they get hungry. That means you weren't overeating. That means you didn't keep eating all the time. You're always not hungry. It means you're chronically overeating. We're not looking for ways to speed up the metabolic rate so people can eat more food and not get fat. We want to moderately caloric restrict so we can slow down the metabolic rate a little bit so people can eat less food and not get too thin. Because a slower metabolic rate is linked to slowing the aging process, and that's the secret to aging slow and keeping your youthful vitality as you get older. So it's completely the opposite of what people think out there.
Right. Many people that I work with in the group think that they're going to switch their diet and everything is going to change in 3 days and they're going to feel great. But you spoke tonight about some of the side effects when you immediately switch to a nutritarian diet. And it would be great to review those because so many people are thinking, I feel terrible on day 3 and I'm going to go back to what I was doing.
Day 3 is when you feel the worst.
Right.
That's when people feel the worst. So if you stop narcotics or you stop smoking cigarettes, the one day you stop, it's kind of it's not feeling good, but it's tolerable. It's really bad on day 2 and really bad on day 3. That's when people fall back and go back to smoking again too. Mm-hmm. And the more toxic you are and the more unhealthy your diet is, the more discomfort you have when you try to eat healthfully. Mm-hmm. The healthier you are, the less you're going to feel uncomfortable when you try to eat even healthier. Because there's 2 phases of digestion. There's the anabolic phase, and the word anabolic means to build. That's where while you're eating and digesting food, you're in a building phase. And the liver's busy absorbing and storing. And then when you finish digestion, you're in a catabolic phase. You're breaking down and living off of what was stored. And that's when the liver can enhance its deconjugating toxins, removal, to make them water soluble so the kidney can excrete it. Getting rid of the extra ammonia, turning it into urea and uric acid so the kidney pee it out. Removing advanced glycation end products. And so in other words, your body is more effectively healing and repairing and removing waste products more effectively in the non-feeding, non-digesting state. So the body needs that time when it's not eating and not digesting food. So when people are thinking they're going to eat food all day long and keep snacking to keep the metabolic rate up, that's the opposite of what they should do for longevity. We want them to eat food as infrequently as possible, so they spend time in a non-digestive state, so the body can actively catch up on its repair and remove toxins. And when you're eating a healthy diet, when you go into the non-feeding catabolic phase, you feel great. You feel nothing. Until the point when your stored glycogen starts to diminish, and then you need to eat again, and you get a signal to eat, which is true hunger, felt in the neck and throat, which makes food taste great. It's not shakiness, it's not fatigue, it's not weakness, it's not stomach cramping, it's not headachy. Those are symptoms of withdrawal from a poor diet. So people coming off a standard diet have to overeat, and they have to eat too frequently and too much just not to feel ill. If they don't keep overeating, they'll feel ill. When you focus on nutritional quality, which enables the body to remove so much metabolic and toxic waste products, then when you're not eating food, you're not feeling ill at all, you're not feeling tired. You're not needing food to stimulate yourself to keep your energy up. You shouldn't be tired from not eating. Feeling fatigue is not a symptom of hunger. You can get up in the morning and skip breakfast, and at 11 o'clock you could go to the gym and go play a tennis match or go out, and you should be just as strong with the food or without food. Eventually you're going to get hungry, but hunger is not fatigue. But in any case, the point I'm making right now is that you're never connected with the instinctual drive telling you how much to eat unless you focused on the nutritional quality of your diet. So when I'm saying that people should moderate calorically restrict, they don't have to try to go around hungry. They just have to eat a lot of vegetables and a lot of beans and nuts because part of the calories in beans are resistant starch that is not biologically accessible to the body. It's resistant to enzymatic degradation. So the calories are lost in the toilet bowl. So when you feel like you're eating 200 calories of beans, you're not getting 200 calories in. So it shut down your appestat by 200 calories, but then once you digested them, 200 calories didn't come in. You stopped eating because you felt like you had 200 calories, but you didn't really eat 200 calories. When you eat nuts and seeds, the same things happen. Because some of the fat in nuts and seeds binds so tightly to the fibers, to the sterols and stanols, that the fat is sucked out into the toilet bowl. And so you feel like you're eating in 200 calories. The appetite is turned down by 200 calories, but you're only taking in 175, or so you're moderately caloric restricting. So raw vegetables the same way. All their calories are not biologically accessible. So we're talking here about instinctual eating, not recreational eating, not eating when you're not hungry, not addictive eating habits, and almost the entire American population are food addicts. They're not going to feel well if they try to stop eating their rich diets.
If I'm coming off a standard American diet, how patient should I be? How much time is it going to take before I'm feeling really well again on the proper Nutritarian diet?
It usually takes 6 or 7 days to feel better.
Okay.
However, you don't feel ill anymore, you start to feel normal. But there's a secondary feeling that comes of feeling even better than that a few months later. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes longer to lift the brain fog and get more concentration, more focus, and more creativity. And that usually happens a few months later. And sometimes people can have a secondary episode of detoxification that occurs once more nutrients are flooded to the body, where they start to feel a little fatigue and a little bit of uncomfortable that occurs, between 2 and 4 weeks after the diet change. But that's much more minor, and it's not as usually dramatic a sensation as the first day 2 and day 3 and day 4 is. But then and also with any addiction, it's the same thing. Take a person who's addicted to, cocaine or opiates. They put them in these centers for 3 months because they know it takes about 3 months for them to lose their tolerance, and they lose it they're no longer craving, and so you lose some emotional attachment to the dopamine receptors in the brain are tuned down. And you want and you're looking for another way to stimulate dopamine. A lot of these drug addicts go on to sugar, become sugar addicts, or,
Right.
but it's the same thing. So what I'm saying right now is that being a sugar addict and being a fast food addict, in many cases, can lead to drug addiction and illegal drug addiction and crime. What I'm saying is that the American diet gets people addicted to food, and the food is the gateway drug to more serious criminal behavior, and people aren't recognizing how food affects the brain, and that today we have 1 in 5 Americans are mentally ill. 100 years ago, it was 1 in 100 Americans who went mentally ill. And people are popping pills for anxiety and depression, and they're becoming angry and violent and aggressive, and they can't do their careers or be creative and think logically, and their primary motivation for living becomes fueling their addiction, fueling their food addiction, fueling their mouth, living from one meal to the next, and their whole their life is derived around food. And they become obese and they become diabetic and they cut short their life.
One of the really fascinating topics that you cover thoroughly in Fast Food Genocide is about food deserts, but also an inner city and some of the race-related issues around food and lack of nutritive food. Can you speak to that a little bit? It's really a fascinating topic that I haven't really, been exposed to until I read your book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because, I always felt uncomfortable in medical school when they were teaching us that Black Americans had so much higher risk of prostate cancer, of stroke, of diabetes, and poor educational achievement, and all, as if they were teaching in a manner as if genetics affect disease risk so much that Black Americans are genetically more vulnerable to these diseases like diabetes and strokes and dementia and intellectual impairments and things like that. I never sat totally well with it. Now I've learned as I did the studies and reviewed everything that it's not true. There's a form of bigotry there. Mm-hmm. That I went back to the history of when Black Americans were first freed after the Civil War, and they were growing their own gardens and had exposure to vegetables. They were actually eating more vegetables than a lot of the poor white Caucasian Americans were, who they called the 3M diet, eating a diet of largely cornmeal and molasses and meats and pork. And their diet was niacin deficient, and they developed a lot of mental problems and emotional problems, and that's where the original term rednecks came from, because when you were niacin deficient, it causes pellagra, develop a red neck, and you develop suicidal and homicidal and violent and become more aggressive, and the American health system back then, American physicians, didn't recognize niacin as being the deficiency as being the cause of pellagra. They didn't know it was a nutritional issue. They thought these were genetic inferiority. They thought that these poor whites were genetically inferior, and these diseases were genetic of becoming more likely to propensity for violence and poor intellectual achievement and intellectual ability related to their diet. We're doing the same thing today. We're blaming we had the violence, the Jim Crow laws, and the explosion of violence against Black populations, driving them into northern cities where they didn't have access to vegetables anymore. Then you had World War II and World War II, where we had the invention of processed and fast foods and convenience foods that had long shelf life. And then we had and fast foods and convenience store industries. But in any case, we had populations without the exposure to produce, without sufficient exposure to be able to purchase fresh vegetables and fresh produce. And they suffered greatly from those nutritional problems, which affected them intellectually and emotionally. And the point I'm making right now is it's not the color of your skin. I showed in Fast Food Genocide that if we look at a particular population based on their food availability around where they're being raised or living, that the food availability determines their health and determines their emotional outlook and the risk of these diseases we're talking about. And for example, after the Civil War, the Black Americans had the most centenarians and achieved educational and capitalist improvements and were succeeding. It wasn't until they started living in the inner cities with lack of access to food. But any population you put with that food deprivation is going to start to have more cancer and less educational achievement and more people resorting to drug use and all those problems we develop. So this is a food issue. It's a societal issue. And our country is founded on this idea of the American dream, equal opportunity, and the fact that we have such a country of tremendous resources that enables us to have a great opportunity and great health if we have exposure to food, good food. And it's as Americans, I want this information to get out. I'm so passionate about it because we have to give all children, all people, the right opportunity for good health and for creativity and intellectual achievement and a good life, and we could do it. We could give people, it's what Mayor Bloomberg tried to do in New York with the food vendors taking food stamps and taking credit card on the streets with the vegetable carts. It's what, and it's amazing because it worked. And they gave an economic incentive for supermarkets to open up in what we considered food deserts. And we saw people started living longer. We saw disease rates go down. And we saw drug use and smoking rates go down as well. People had less smoking. And so when there's the right constellation of factors, and we can help people more. And I lecture in areas of the inner city, and in the white ivory towers thinking, oh, they're not going to embrace this, they're not going to eat healthy anyway while you're wasting your time. Don't even tell people about reversing diabetes, they just want to eat the fast foods. It's not true. They see the destruction of people's lives, both physically and emotionally, all around them. They recognize that when it's explained to them and it's taught to them, they can become enthusiastically passionate about changing their diet because they see people dropping dead. Do you know scientists actually show that there's so much obesity and diabetes in some of these food deserts that the average years of potential life lost is 45 years of life lost, comparing an obese diabetic person living in a food desert compared to a person with good food access living in a suburb like Boulder, Colorado or something. Okay. Showing that average age of 90, average age of 45. That's like half your life is cut short because of food exposure. Take the same person, put them in that environment, and live to be 90, not 45.
Unbelievable.
Right.
I could talk to you all night, but I want to hit one last topic, and that is you spoke tonight about the metaphor of putting the oxygen mask on yourself and then getting out and spreading the word. How do you see the momentum now with social media, like the work I'm doing? What do you see, and any recommendations on what could be done better to spread the word better, etc.?
Well, yeah. I mean, I do think that more people are understanding that you are what you eat. The idea that we can just put anything in our body and not pay a price for it is ridiculous. Our brain, and that these foods affect our waistline, don't affect our brain function, is ridiculous. We're seeing more suicides. We're seeing more violence. We're seeing people shooting other people with guns. And who's connecting this with the junk food diet people are eating? We've got to, so our society is really moving in the wrong direction. And certainly this type of thing that you're doing, other people are doing, are great. And that's what people have to be able to understand and articulate, and we have to get, the media has to be exposed to it. We have to get politicians and teachers and the school system exposed to it. And we have to get celebrities exposed to this so they can speak. Everybody has to come with more people getting together, and every person has a role to play in improving their own health as a role model, and their communities and their friends and neighbors and their families, and that's the only way this is going to work. It spreads from the bottom up across all of America. So we have people to be able to understand it, articulate it, and to be able to change what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fuhrman, for your time. Dr. Fuhrman's latest book, Fast Food Genocide, I'll put a link in the description. Thank you so much for your time and your great work.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to a lot more in the future.